I'm not like some self-help guru that pretends that like these things are all easy. They're very difficult sometimes. That's half the battle. The point is that the life that you want is on, again, so cliche, but the life that you want is on the other side of the difficult things, the difficult conversations, the difficult actions, the difficult ideas, right? And when you can cross that chasm, that's when you truly live a life that you want.
Welcome to another episode of Negotiate Your Best Life. I'm so excited today because we get to talk to one of my dear friends, Scott Clary, who's also a dynamic entrepreneur, who's also one of the top podcasters in the world, who's also just absolutely an amazing human because I mean, the stuff that he accomplishes and the stuff that he's up to in the world is just absolutely incredible. I just adore you, Scott. I mean, you
I
have,
adore you too. Thank you.
I mean, you have, okay, let me just go through. You host the Success Story podcast, a number one entrepreneurship and top 10 business show distributed
Mhm.
on Cheddar, Amazon Prime, DirecTV, Hulu. But you've done all of these things because of the type of person you are. You have to be it before you can have it. And that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about today. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you are, and you really do embody that. And you haven't always been that. And that's what I want to talk about today is how do you have these things when you feel stuck, when you feel like you're in these struggles, when you're in
Mhm.
these places in your life when maybe you have these setbacks, you have these failures, you have these things that aren't going your way, and you want to make a transition. Maybe it's a transition in your business and your
Mhm.
relationship, or um, you want more money, you want a better business, you want a better relationship, you want, the things that everybody wants in life.
Yeah. I
Um,
think that, well, I was going to say that a lot of this, sort of what you're describing is said simply is imposter syndrome. It's when you don't believe that you can achieve what you want. And I think that everybody has that. And I'm a very pragmatic person. I mean, if you think about all the sort of the buzzwords about how to get over imposter syndrome, you can talk about like manifestation or abundance mindset. And these are all very great ideas. And I'm no expert in any of them, but I always like things that I can like touch and feel. I'm very pragmatic, if that makes sense. So if I if I think about an idea that served me, all the ideas that have served me, I sort of battle tested and proved out because that's just the way that I think. I have to think of something like tactical and I have to execute on it and I have to gauge the results and I have to see my before state and my after state and see if it's improved. And I think that that's how, and applying some ideas we can talk about today, I think that that's how I've sort of beat imposter syndrome to a degree. Um, just to kick it off, a very simple idea, and you know, you gave me a very nice introduction. Right now, what I do is podcast for a living, and I like to write, and a lot of what I do for work is like content. That's I'm a creator now. In my past life, I was an entrepreneur. I've built companies. I've worked for companies. I've done it all. I've been solopreneur. I've done sort of high scale entrepreneur, growing a software company. I've worked for tech companies when I first started out my career. So I've done basically any kind of career that you could possibly imagine. And I've also had a lot of jobs that sucked and weren't as sexy as what I just described. But so I've done a whole bunch of different things. And I think that hopefully, regardless of what you're looking to achieve in your life or, you know, the job you want, the title you want, the amount of money you want to make, the company you want to build, or the non-business stuff, so the relationship you want to have, the you know, the body, the physique you want to have because you want to lose weight. Hopefully, it's all on the other side of some of these ideas that we can talk about. So the first idea that's really served me well, that's allowed me to accelerate in my career or build a podcast or, you know, cold email some really impressive people in the first 10 to 15 episodes when I was starting my show that I had candidly no business reaching out to, uh,
and I should say, by
was,
the way,
yeah,
you've interviewed some of the most uh, famous people in the world, some of the most incredible people in the
yeah,
world. So
But yes, yes, but I was interviewing famous people before I should have been interviewing famous people, meaning like I had Guy Kawasaki, who was one of the first employees at Apple. I had Grant Cardone, who's obviously a big real estate sales thought leader. I had Anthony Scaramucci, who was ironically Trump's director of communications for 12 days in his first term, and now he's always been like a big finance guy, but his kind of his claim to fame was that 12-day stint working for Trump. Um, Now I don't think he's a fan of him anymore, but that's a whole other story. So I had these relatively big names when I was like a nobody podcaster. And I guess the question then is like, how did you have the chutzpah, the cojones, whatever, to go after these names? And one idea that served me really, really well to get over imposter syndrome in anything that I do, very basic, but I track my wins. And the reason why I track my wins is because the human brain remembers the negative very easily. So it remembers the trauma. It remembers all the times you lost in life. It remembers when you got fired, when you had no money in your bank account and you went to dinner and your credit card bounced and you're trying to figure out what to do. Like it remembers these are traumatic moments in your life. Um, this is how news companies take advantage of our psyche as well. They know that the most trauma and the most stress and anxiety and horrific events are going to stick in our brains, and they do. And it's probably some survival mechanism from before, thousands of years ago. But now all it does is it reinforces imposter syndrome. So if I just think about the most traumatic negative events that I had in my life, uh, those are the easiest to recall. So it allows me to very quickly almost prove and logic to myself that I'm not worthy of the next thing that I'm taking on because all I can remember are the losses or the failures. And the sad thing about that is that that memory is not 100% accurate. We very quickly
Mm,
forget all the successes that we've had in our life, all the times
mm.
when we've got the job, all the times when the interview went well, all the times when we had multiple job offers, all the times when we made our first sale as a solopreneur, all the times when we raised money, all the times when we made a great hire, not just all the times when we had to fire somebody that didn't work out. We forget all of the successes because they don't imprint. They don't imprint in our brain. So when we forget all the successes and we only keep track of the wins, looking back, it's very easy. It's very easy to say, no, I'm not going to try that. I'm not going to do that. I don't feel qualified for that job, or I don't feel qualified to become an entrepreneur because all I can remember are all the times when I failed. But if you find a way, it doesn't have to be elaborate, but if you find some sort of way to track all the times you win, the amount of times people win in life is astronomically higher than how many times they lose. Most
Ah,
people, I don't want to generalize, but most people, if they got up out of bed, made some money, got a job, are healthy, went to the gym, went on a date, it went well. Like there's repeated wins that you can learn from that can give you confidence to approach the next big thing with a significant amount of certainty that it's going to go well because you can just look at all the times that things have gone well in the past. And I
yeah.
think that when you approach these new ambitious ideas that you want to take on with the recollection of how many times you've won in your life, it's very simple to have the courage to take that step or to leave. I know that you deal with a lot of people who are in bad relationships, business and otherwise.
Yes.
If you think about the good relationships that you've had in your life, and that's what you can remember, it's going to be way easier to leave the narcissist or to leave the toxic relationship because you can remember all the good things. But if you only remember the bad, you tell me, you're the expert here, but I would assume that if you can only remember the bad, the first thought is, well, I might just stay because I don't have 100% confidence that the next person is going to be any better. So I'm
Hmm.
just going to stay in this really toxic environment. It happens for jobs, it happens for relationships, it happens for careers, it happens when somebody stays in a company even though they want to try building something themselves and becoming entrepreneurs because they only remember the bad. So you can journal, you can write down notes. If you have a fire Instagram, you can scroll back over the year and see all the cool things that you've done. Like just create space to track wins in your life. That's
Mm,
all I ask.
that's so true. I mean, I remember I had a business coach early on, and I remember her saying to me one time, Rebecca, you're really like the type of person, I bet you, that if you did a talk and there were 100 people in the room, and 99 of them were cheering and screaming and saying, "What a great job you did." And one person in the room was like sitting in the back, like not cheering and glaring at you. You'd be like staring at the one person going,
Yeah.
what's going on with that?" Like,
We all do. We all do this. I'll
yes.
give you a very, very real example of how relevant this is. So when I first started my career, I worked for a telecom company and I was selling cell phones in stores, like in the mall. And one time there was a guy who was trying to commit fraud in the store, and he was trying to use like a fake credit card or a fake ID to activate a cell phone. And we realized it when we called the cops. And the cop came in and he went to the guy who was still standing at the till. The guy didn't know, and he's like, "Hey, buddy, like, can we go for a walk? I want to talk to you about something." Because the guy was obviously surprised, and the cop took him out of the store and walked him, I don't know, say 200 feet down the hallway in the mall, and then that's when the cop arrested him. And after it was all said and done, uh, the cop comes back into the store just to write his report. And I asked him, like, why did you walk him down the hall and arrest him and not like just arrest him in the store? And he's like, because when you arrest somebody, it's such a traumatic, negative moment in that person's life
Mhm.
that all the people around them imprint in their mind. And
Mhm.
what I didn't want to have happen is I didn't want him, the second he knows he's being arrested, to remember all of your faces. I wanted him just to remember my face
Oh,
because you would remember if it's a very traumatic event, your mind is going to remember those faces for years and years and years.
oh,
And he's like, I just don't know what's going to happen if he remembers these are the 3 or 4 employees that got you arrested. So I rather he
oh,
just remember me. That's how powerful negative emotions imprint on your mind. So
wow,
just be careful of them. And somebody with a psychology degree can probably, from a more scientific perspective, reiterate this, but that was that idea of how negative emotions imprint on our mind. I remember that story like it was yesterday. And at the
wow.
moment, I didn't realize how powerful that was, but now I realize that everything we deal with in a day to day, that our Twitter feeds, our news, all of that, again, the time we got fired, that's all we remember because that's like a
Wow.
self-preservation technique. We remember it so it doesn't happen again. We don't have to self-preserve. There's no self-preservation from closing a deal. Your brain wants it to happen again. So it's not like it has to imprint to warn you that that was an event that could compromise your safety. So I think that just be aware of how powerful negative thoughts are and how the
We have to
imposter
train
syndrome
our
that you're
brain.
feeling.
We have to
Yeah,
train our
exactly. That
brain
imposter
to
syndrome
focus
is
on the
not real.
positive.
It's built on incomplete recollection of your life.
So what you've done is train your brain to focus on the positive.
I've said very simply, yes. Like it sounds so simple, but it's so hard. Everything hijacks our mind and
But so
focuses
our
on the
brain
negative.
is trained for safety. We're wired for
Yes,
safety. We're wired to protect ourselves,
correct.
right? And
Yeah,
so we have to, like, it's because, we're wired for protection. We're not wired to take risks. And so
yes. Because
uh
risks used to kill us. That is that in the caves,
yeah,
risks used to kill us, right? So now we are wired for we still have the brain that we had when risks and traumatic events would actually, end our life. But
right.
now all they do is they just hijack us into believing things that are not complete. Not true, but not the complete picture.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But you've learned to go ahead and take risks.
Yes. Because I can remember how many times I've been successful when
Okay.
I've taken risks.
Yeah.
And
So,
that allows you to get over the imposter syndrome of taking that next,
and then it gives you
risky action.
confidence because once you do that, then it gives you the confidence to do it again.
Exactly. It's a flywheel. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy to a degree.
Yeah. Um, but for people who feel stuck or overwhelmed, like how do you gain the momentum to like get out of that?
I think probably one of the most useful things that you can start with is journaling and keeping track of the things that have gone right in your life. It sounds overly simplistic, but I think that again, that is forcing you to just keep count of the
Mhm.
positive. That's like
Mhm.
the first step. And I would say that combined with understanding that you do have to take some sort of action, as uncomfortable as it can be. Hopefully, the journaling will help you feel like taking action isn't as scary as if you haven't spent a month or two just taking note of the things that have gone right in your life. But understand that you do have to take action. That's a non-negotiable.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then once you do take action, uh, depends on what you want to do. I would say another idea that has sort of helped me de-risk the action is to
Mm-hmm.
reverse engineer someone else's path to success. I
Mm-hmm.
think that you don't have to, just what's the saying? Like throw shit at the wall and hope something sticks, and just navigate blindly through life. If you understand you do have to take action, and then you find somebody who is the role model or the avatar for what you want to accomplish, and
Mm-hmm.
then take some time and document out the steps they've taken to get to where they are today, and start executing against those steps, your
Mm-hmm.
likelihood of success is just going to be much higher because you're
Mm-hmm.
not having to reinvent the wheel. I also think that people overcomplicate everything. I mean, in the age we have an abundance of information. If you want to lose weight, if you want to have a happier relationship, if you want to build a business, be an entrepreneur, if you want to get a promotion at work, there's 2,000 people on YouTube that are describing the exact steps that you have to take to get there, let alone finding somebody in your actual life, not just online, they would also probably be happy to walk you through if you just ask them, because most people love sitting down and talking about themselves and how they achieve what they achieved. I've never had an issue finding mentors my entire life if I just had the courage to ask. But now you don't even need to, because you have a million mentors online. And reverse engineering success, again, is just about de-risking. And when you de-risk, then I think that also psychologically you feel a little bit more comfortable because you have a roadmap to follow, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to, and I don't quite understand why people try and reinvent the wheel all the time. I think that with a little bit of research and attention to detail, most businesses that you're trying to start, I mean, I deal with a lot of entrepreneurs, so they're usually trying to figure out how to start a business.
Mm-hmm.
Most businesses, most entrepreneurial endeavors, like you spend enough time on YouTube or listening to podcasts, you'll find so many resources. It's unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
Like the difficulty is actually not in finding resources. It would be making sure that the people who are giving the advice are authentic and haven't used shortcuts to get to where they are. That
Mm-hmm.
would be the most difficult thing. But
Mm-hmm.
that's sort of like step two. I think the first thing that people have to do is just spend time researching and teaching themselves how someone else has done it. But this isn't just this is not just a business idea. If you want to lose weight, go find somebody that has been working out for the past year. Not somebody who's been working out for 20 years, but somebody who committed to the gym, went on a fitness journey, lost 10 pounds or 15 pounds, hopefully without drugs, because then that's the hack that they're not going to tell you about, somebody who's done it the way that you want to do it. And not that there's anything wrong if you want to use Ozempic or whatever, or Monjaro, be my guest, but the point is you want to make sure that they are 100% forthcoming with the journey that they've been on, so that if you follow and emulate those steps, you're going to achieve somewhat similar results. The same goes for relationships. If you want to have a successful relationship, look for somebody who's in a happy relationship, and there'll be signals and there'll be clues as to what makes them successful. There are
Mm-hmm.
people that are highly successful that have broken relationships and divorces. There's also people like I've interviewed Mark Randolph. I think you know him, the co-founder of Netflix, and he speaks quite often about how he maintained a relationship with his wife while he was in hyper growth mode with Netflix. And he had a dedicated date night every Tuesday where at 5 o'clock, doesn't matter what fires were going on in Netflix, he would shut off his phone and go on date night with his wife. And he maintained that religiously. So if I'm an entrepreneur and I want to figure out also how to, have this incredible relationship with my spouse, maybe that's somebody, or maybe that's one trick that I'm gonna adopt, because obviously that's somebody who I look up to that has figured out the game that I want to play. And I think that that's the second piece to it.
I mean, I think a lot of this goes to creating the vibrational frequency, not to get like a little bit woo-woo on you,
Go for it.
of who you have to be in order to
Yes.
attract the people in your life that you in other words, you have I talk a lot with my coaches about being the person that you have to be in order
Hmm.
to attract the people into your life and the things in your life that you want. In other words, I often say, you can't be uh in at 88.7 radio station and hope that you're going to attract 107.3, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you're still down here because I think a lot of times people don't realize that they're still in this sort of victim mentality because there's like a bit of a payoff for them, but they don't realize that they're sort of still self-sabotaging.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I was actually listening to a podcast this morning that I thought was interesting. It was a modern wisdom podcast, and they were basically speaking about how victim mentality and even uh, therapy culture has become synonymous with someone's identity, meaning
Hmm.
that people are so caught up in relegating responsibility that, and listen, there's very valid reasons for therapy, obviously. But when people are saying they're the victim or going to therapy for years and years and years and years, and there's no positive outcome, it's because they don't, in my opinion, it's because they feel like it's easier to relegate responsibility for their life to someone else than to own their circumstances. That is, to some people, probably a very unpopular opinion. I'm not talking about when there's significant traumatic events that take years of therapy, but I think that there was a stat they discussed in the UK. It was like 30% of women were in therapy of some sort. And I know that, life is tough, but I think that the whole goal of therapy should be to get out of it, not to always live in that mode for the rest of your life. I think that if you were looking at any service that you pay for, the goal is to take you from the state that you're at right now to the state where you want to be. And I think that people go when they have like a victim mentality or they're seeking help from someone else, even like a coach, forget therapist, uh, it should be to get out of victim mentality or to go seek help, it should be you should understand where you're at right now and where you need to go, not just almost adopt victim mentality as your entire story and just bask in it for years. And I think that that is the opposite. It's the exact opposite of action and agency and internal locus of control and taking control of your own life. And I think that that's actually quite toxic. Um, Now, how do you get out of that loop? I, some of the ideas that we just discussed, I think, are stepping stones for sure. Because if you feel like you can accomplish it, then I think that victim mentality uh, and seeking out answers all the time become a little bit less beneficial when you feel like you can figure out some of it yourself. I do believe that. And I think those two ideas we just spoke about help you sort of start that journey. Um, I believe a very important idea, and I'm actually not sure how, outside of what we spoke about, I'm actually not sure how somebody can internalize this, but I think it's an important idea that more people should think about, just so they know that it exists. So one idea that I really love, uh, you can call it agency, you can call it internal versus external locus of control. What it means, internal locus of control means that you believe that you happen to the world. You're responsible for all the outcomes. I mean, like Jocko Willink speaks about this. It's like extreme ownership. You, good and bad, you're responsible for everything. External locus of control means that good or bad, you had no input and you had no ability to actually impact what is happening in your life. That to me is victim mentality. When you think that everything that happens to you, good or bad, it's some cosmic force or it's luck or it's karma or it's astrology or whatever it is. And I think that to be successful in life or in the objective that you're trying to accomplish, business, relationship, or otherwise, there has to be a shift from external locus of control, where you live in this victim mentality, to internal.
That you can cause and create. You can be the
Exactly.
cause and creator of all of everything in your life.
Exactly. A
But
thousand
but
percent
but in
correct.
order to make that shift, you also have to take responsibility
Yes.
For all the things that have happened,
That's tough. That's
right?
tough. That's
And
tough when it's like you probably deal with this quite a bit when somebody's in like a bad relationship and they're like, well, I didn't deserve this. No, you never deserved it. But to get out of that, you have to take responsibility because if you don't take responsibility, you will never get out of that situation. Or if you do get out of it and you haven't taken responsibility to some degree, you'll find yourself in that situation again.
right.
It's a very difficult conversation to have with somebody, but the second they understand that, and I mean this in the most like well-intentioned way ever, if you believe that everything is your responsibility and you have absolute control over your circumstances, that's when your life improves. That is when your life
100%.
improves 11 out of 10 times.
Right. And I think a lot of times, though, what people feel, and this is where it gets tough and where people kind of split hairs, is that they feel like if I do this, then that other person gets away with what they did.
Yes,
And
but yeah,
and so what I think people have to take and be okay with is go, no, they didn't get away with it, but yes, you have to just move on and just go, let them live their lives, let
yeah,
them send them light, but over there, and
yeah.
you move on. They're going to
Well, I
be
think that's
whoever they are.
exactly. And think about when you say like they're getting away with it. Like whose life are you living? Are you living your life or are you living their life? Like the goal of this is to have your best life. Your
Yeah.
best life, your best life can completely remove them out of it and get away with it. I mean, I think that you winning in life for the type of people that we're talking about, like bad partners in business or like romantic partners, you living your best life is actually the ultimate like F you to that person. So I
Yeah.
don't think they're getting away with shit. I think that if you don't take ownership and you don't remove yourself from the situation and they live in your brain like rent free forever, that's when they're winning.
Yes.
That's when they're getting away with it.
Yes.
Imagine if you have, depending on what you believe, you have one life, right? Depending
Right.
on what school of religious or spiritual thought you subscribe to. But let's say you have one life. How insane is it that you spend a second of your life worrying about what someone else thinks, what someone else is like? You have to move on. Like there is a clock. There, I mean, like there is a clock, and I think that there's a few more ideas we can talk about, but one of them, it's dark, it's morbid, but it encourages action, is stoicism. It's the realization that at some point you die,
Yeah. It's
and
happening. Nobody gets out of here alive.
nobody gets out of here
That's
alive,
it.
right? So if you're gonna
At
kick it
some
one day, which
point,
we all
time
were,
is up.
yeah, doesn't that encourage you to be like, wow, I don't say you're 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, doesn't matter. I don't I have two choices. I can spend my last, you know, 50, 40, 30, 20, 10 years on this planet worrying about what someone else thinks and what someone else has done to me, or I can spend it living my best life. To me, it's such an easy, obvious outcome. Now, if there's things they've done that are illegal, and that's a whole different story, but that shouldn't be your mission in life. I think your mission in life should be to heal, to move on, and you do your job with authorities, or if they do something like really horrific, you want to make sure that they don't hurt anybody else ever again. But at the same time, you still have to focus on living your best life till again the day that you die. And I think those two ideas can exist in at the same time, where you are focused on removing yourself from the shitty situation and moving on. And if there's something that you feel like they're actually going to hurt somebody and there's like a legal consequence, then let the courts and the police do their thing with that. But at the end of the day, you have to heal. Like that is the outcome. So the sooner you start that process, the better.
Yeah, because otherwise you're allowing yourself to be a victim. It's exactly what happened with me when I had a narcissistic business partner and I was on vacation with
Yeah.
my family, and I was on this mountaintop. Did I tell you this?
You did tell me this story. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, you know what? No, you don't get to be on vacation here with my family.
Yeah.
No, I'm like not in creation mode. I'm not like living the life that my creator gave me here. I'm not, you don't get any more of my life. That's it.
One more idea that I just wrote about, which I think is a very powerful idea. It's sort of like a mental model for approaching each day fresh. And the idea is every single night, uh, I want you to pretend when you go to bed, I want you to sort of like excuse yourself from all your previous commitments, your work commitments, your relationship commitments. And every day when you start fresh, I want you to pretend that the old you died last night and the new you is waking up fresh with this blank slate of things that you can choose to work on or to be part of. You're not just doing the things or doing the work or dating the person because you feel this moral obligation because you've been doing it for so long. And I think that when you approach life like that, I think that that gives you again the ownership to take control of your own life. And it doesn't mean like you're getting rid of all your obligations and you're not, being true and faithful to your partner you've been with. The point is that every single day you should choose to do those things fresh. You should choose the job. You should choose the business. You should choose the partner. And if there's hesitation, like if, for example, you wake up and you're like, you know what, today I wouldn't choose the business I'm building, or I wouldn't choose the person I'm dating or even married to, that is a huge red flag. That is an
Right.
absolute huge red flag. So I think that that's a very helpful mental model it's like sort of like a filter for the things that we have in our life. Are we doing them because we're choosing them every single day? Or are we doing them because, well, there's a sunk cost and I've put so much time into it and I can't blow it up now. That's not a healthy way to live life because
No.
that creates resentment. And it's easier said than done. I'm not ignorant to that, but I think that when you start thinking this way, you start to realize you have absolute control over your life and your outcomes.
So good. So good. I love that. Okay, so you obviously live your best life every single day.
I try my best.
I mean, so what's like a motto that you live by? What's like, what's the one thing that's non-negotiable for you?
A motto that I live by. Um, I would say, let me pick something that we haven't discussed yet, because some of those things are things that I live by. And like, don't get me wrong, I'm not like some self-help guru that pretends that like these things are all easy. They're very difficult sometimes. That's half the battle. The point is that the life that you want is on, again, so cliche, but the life that you want is on the other side of the difficult things, the difficult conversations, the difficult actions, the difficult ideas, right? And when you can cross that chasm, that's when you truly live a life that you want
Mhm.
and that you're happy with and that you're fulfilled from. And I think that that's also very important for people understand what, quote unquote success actually is. And
Mhm.
and I'll answer your question in a second, but uh, I think that most people have the incorrect definition of success because we usually tie it back to financial metrics. And I'm fortunate enough to be on the other side of some very successful people that have made more money than God and more money than they'll ever need for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
And sort of discussing what success actually means with people that have more money than anybody will ever need is interesting because I wish more people would, again, cliche, enjoy the journey, but also not just benchmark success financially. So figure out what the perfect day looks like in terms of work, in terms of physical fitness, in terms of cognitive fitness, in terms of relationships, and then optimize your life every single day to achieve fulfillment achieve fulfillment across all these different categories. I think that is happiness and success. And even before we started recording, you asked me what's new, and I mentioned there's a couple different things that I might work on, but I'm not 100% set on them yet because I don't want to. My life is very good right now. I do my podcasting. I have a creative outlet. I go to the gym. I have, good relationship with Gina, my better half, and my friends. And I don't want to start something that's going to compromise any of that just in pursuit of more money.
Mhm.
because I see people that come out on the other side of money where they have only optimized for money for the past 20, 30 years, and they're depressed and they're divorced and they're overweight and they're tired and all these different negatives. So I think that, again, finding a way to optimize every single day so that you live your best life across all these different categories is very, very important. That, I guess, that's one mantra that I live by. And I try not to take things on um, just for financial gain. That's very important to me. If they
So
detract from all the other
when
parts of my life.
I like that, when you're struggling, I mean, if you have a down day,
Mhm.
what's your go-to? What do you do?
Um, my go-to is fitness. My go-to is always fitness. I think that whenever I have a difficult day or I get a, bad news or work's just stressful, for me, movement is key. I've always been that way. I think that there's some science behind it too, like the endorphins and the chemical response to working out and movement is huge. But I find that when I go work out, if I get stressful news, I refuse to respond to it until I go to the gym or go for a walk or do something. That's the first thing that I'll always do. That is huge, huge, huge. To me, that's like the biggest hack because we are in the age of remote work and everybody's sort of stuck in an office stuck in their home office behind a computer, and it could be for all day. And I think that psychologically is very damaging for our well-being, for our mental well-being, and for our physical. And I think that when we have bad news and we haven't done any exercise, we haven't moved at all, I just feel like, in my personal opinion, the news it just feels like 10x worse than it actually is. And the second I go for a walk or a run or the gym and then I come back, first of all, that time gives me sort of the space to think about how I'm going to react to it as opposed to reacting angry. But then when I come back, I find that I don't know. I just feel like the news isn't as stressful as it was like an hour and a half before, and then I can answer properly or I can respond properly.
Yeah.
And so that's the first thing. The second thing, which is a huge, I know that this is not everybody, but having a partner, like having a better half
Hmm.
who just creates a home that is easy to come back to when things are stressful is probably, in my opinion, the second biggest hack in my success. So what I mean by that is when things are not going well in my life and I'm stressed out or I get again bad email, bad call, bad news. For me, Gina is the person that helps me remove myself from that negative emotional reaction
Mm-hmm.
and allows me to contextualize how good or bad this event actually is and reminds me that life's going to go on regardless. And I
Mm.
think that having that partner, like, I think that having that partner creates a home that is conducive to high performance. I think that high performing people that are pushing the boundaries in their career, in their business, entrepreneurs, I believe with 100% certainty that it is way harder than it has to be if you are left alone with your own thoughts all the time and you
Uh,
don't have somebody to pull you out of that.
yeah.
Or even worse, if you're with somebody that turns your home into a hostile environment so that when you have stress at work, the second you shut off work, there's more anxiety and there's more fighting and there's more stress, and you are living in this high cortisol, high anxiety, high stress environment 24/7, which I'm sure is going to kill some people very quickly.
Yeah.
If you just look at like the health implications. And also, if you have somebody who creates like a traumatic home environment, um, you're not going to be thinking as clearly with your work and vice versa. So I think that just having that partner that is on the same page as you creates this really loving home for you, I think is like the biggest hack for a
Yeah.
variety
Yeah.
of reasons.
I mean, there's so
I
many people in my community who are in toxic situations. And, I always say it's like better to be alone than feel like alone
agreed with that. I do agree with
in
that, but
a
I
position.
think the peak is to have somebody who is have a better half who is
Totally.
able to help you navigate all these like,
Mhm.
difficult, shitty days that happen inevitably. Like, I mean, it doesn't matter, what business you built, there's going to be a whole bunch of horrible days on that journey. It'll
Yeah.
happen.
Well,
Um,
kudos to you for creating the space and creating uh, yourself to be the person that can hold space and be a healed enough version to be
Oh,
that.
thank you. Thank you. I think it's like listen, it's a forever journey, but that's everything. I think that the second you sort of stop trying to heal, stop trying to improve, stop trying to build, I think that that's when we die. So it's a constant. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it takes a lot to show up for yourself enough and also for each other. I know my
Yeah.
husband and I have been together. We're starting our 27th year.
Congratulations. My God.
We
You look good for how long you've been married. Congratulations.
we met in law school. We met in law school at University of Miami a long time ago.
That's
Yeah.
wild. 27 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
We were just young pups. We met just a stone's throw away from where you are right now.
I know. You were down the street.
Yeah.
But you must feel the same way. Like I've been in bad relationships before, and it just bleeds into all areas of your life. Like it's
Yeah.
very hard. I mean, some people can compartmentalize a little bit better, but I mean, everybody's only human. I don't care what kind of off switch you have. If you have a toxic home life, that bleeds into everything. And I
Yeah.
also think that, I've interviewed a couple psychologists that speak about uh, early childhood trauma. And early childhood trauma usually comes from the home that the child is raised in.
Mhm.
And I think it has a little bit more impact than like adult trauma and
Oh,
living
a
in an adult
lot.
environment. But when
Lot.
you have like early childhood trauma, think about if, it's not just impacting you and your wife or your husband. That early childhood trauma, if you have kids, that imprints in their subconscious, and that
It,
candidly screws up most of their life to a
well,
degree. And
that's
it
what
can
causes
also,
narcissism. I mean, that's what I talk
yes,
about. I mean, that's what
yeah,
it impacts the limbic brain, and
yeah.
that's what causes that narcissistic injury. It causes an oversensitive limbic system, which causes the cortex to shut down when it gets activated and triggered. And yeah, I can go on, but there's a whole
And a
science
lot of people don't
to
even
it.
realize that, like, oh, we fight all the time in front of the kids. Like, well, we're not hurting the kids. They're just, no,
Oh, no,
the
no.
kids can't understand what's happening.
It
And
causes
then when they grow up,
arrested
there's like,
development.
what? Exactly. And
Yeah.
I've spoken to doctors that have sort of shown studies that early childhood trauma for your kids can actually manifest as physical, like sickness and autoimmune diseases
Hmm.
when they're adults, which is
Well,
wild.
because
I mean,
it's
this,
because of the cortisol levels,
yeah,
because it raises the cortisol levels. Because to your point, when you were talking earlier about how, our bodies have never really adjusted past, caveman days,
yeah,
it's like because our bodies don't know the difference between a bear standing in front of us or or
yeah,
actual danger, and so our bodies react the same as they do with any kind of stress, right?
thousand
So
percent.
it's cortisol and adrenaline and all of that, and sustained stress. That cortisol and adrenaline causes um, damage
Yes.
to the limbic system part of the brain in children, and that's what causes that oversensitivity as adults. And then when they get stressed, it causes that cortex to shut down, and that's why they don't think clearly.
Mhm.
Um, and they're overly emotional, and that's what causes that rage and so
And think about now with social media, like humans were not meant to be exposed to the amount of negative news that we have access to now. Like
mm,
if you think about how humans originally, they didn't have Twitter. They were in small communities. They didn't know that there was some horrible, horrific event happening halfway across the world where people died. They had no idea. So
right.
now you have like work is stressful. If your home life is stressful, plus your pastimes and your hobbies with social media is just like nonstop mental hijacking of these high stress events. We are living, candidly, I don't even know how people live as long as they do with the amount of cortisol that floods through your body
Mhm.
24/7, 365. If you
Right,
actually know what cortisol does to you, it's
right.
horrible. And this is also why, obviously there's a large part of the reason why people are depressed and are not in shape is because of food, but it's also the hormonal. Like
It
you
is.
try losing weight when you are full of cortisol every single day. Like it is very difficult. It is exceptionally difficult.
It
So
is.
that compounded with bad food, like our health is just horrific. That's why I really, honestly, sometimes I really, every time I go to Europe, and I'm like working on a Friday afternoon, the people I'm with are like, they look at me like I'm crazy. Like I have three heads. Like, why would you be working on a Friday afternoon?
I know. Their
Like,
lifestyle is so different.
but it's so much healthier.
And their
And
food is actually
yeah,
not as polluted with that's a whole other
there's a
conversation.
whole bunch of lessons that we can take from European lifestyle that I think would dramatically, anyways,
Yeah.
that is a whole other podcast. But yes. So
But
just be aware of all
wait,
these things.
that's why exercise is so important and vagus nerve
Yeah.
stimulation and that's another whole conversation. But we could get into we need to have a podcast part two over here.
Deal. Deal.
You
Anytime.
and I could talk for hours, I swear. We had
I
this
know.
conversation when we met in person, a couple of months ago. We were like, oh my God, we're so aligned on so many things, you know? So this is why I knew that having you on was going to be so good.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah. So, okay, where can people learn more about you, your podcast, all your stuff? Where can they follow you?
Yeah, for sure. So if you like this kind of podcast, this is sort of what I do too. So you can go check out the podcast. It's called Success Story. Rebecca's on it, plus a whole bunch of other cool people. Actually, you've been on it twice now by the time this comes out. And we'll do many more. So it's called Success Story Podcast. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts. And then if you want to connect with me on social, it's all the same. It's at Scott D middle initial, so Scott D Clary, and you can find me on anywhere that with that handle.
Yeah. And he's absolutely incredible. Definitely go follow him, check him out, listen to his podcast, subscribe to it, go check out his Instagram and everything else.
Thank you.
Scott, this has been such a pleasure. I think I'm going to have you back a second time too. Uh,
Deal.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you.